Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Bismay, we'll go back and forth again. Starting on page 70 of the business plan, performance indicator 1D indicates municipal waste, municipal solid waste to landfills of looks like 565 kilograms per capita. I was talking with the Recycling Council of Alberta. They sent me some data. Their data shows that Alberta disposes towards 1,000 kilograms per capita per year, which is obviously substantially different than the data reported in your business plan. Can you just explain the discrepancy between their numbers and yours?
I would have to take that under advisement to have a look at what their methodologies are. Ours come from things that are reported from municipal and private landfills, as well as on the per capita, it's the StatsCan data. So I'm not sure if there's daylight between which census or those kinds of things as well.
Okay. So what they did show, which I guess I'll ask to see if you believe it's in fact the case, that Alberta disposes more than, by the looks of it, any other province that we have data for. Is that your understanding, that
yes,
our numbers are higher than the other provinces, and that we divert not less than any other province, but certainly substantially less than, say, our neighbors in British Columbia? Is that? That
is also my understanding.
Yeah.
I have some work to do around waste diversion, recycling, and as I indicated to the member from Calgary Mountain View yesterday, we have something of a path forward in order to do that.
Okay. All right. So now, one of those potential paths forward is extended producer responsibility. And my understanding of that is one of those almost too good to be true kind of concepts, where it shifts the responsibility from taxpayers and municipalities in particular to the producer of those products, and they have extended responsibility. And I understand that that is something that has taken hold in BC in particular, and I believe Ontario as well, or perhaps even other parts of the country. But I also understand that there's a Canadian Council as a Minister for the Environment Canada-wide action plan for extended producer responsibility. But that is perhaps not something that we in Alberta have decided to adhere to. Can you just speak to where we are with extended producer responsibility? Is that something that's on your radar?
Certainly on our radar, honourable member, and you know, at one point, probably in the 90s, Alberta led on recycling, and then promptly stopped doing that thing. And so we do have some work to do. There's no question. There are various EPR models in place, or a couple of them in particular across the country. BC is the furthest ahead with this and have had to make some changes to their systems over time to make sure that the costs were not, to move the costs from municipalities, as the member points out. This is something that the CCME has discussed. It was my first CCME meeting in June of 2015 when we discussed it, and I believe that it is coming back onto the agenda for the next CCME. We are currently consulting around an EPR model for ag plastics and having those conversations with municipalities and agricultural producers and others. Those conversations are active right now. And certainly we're beginning to hear more and more from municipalities around at least enabling an EPR model in the regulation, and then we would have to do, I think, some considerable more consultation and public policy work in order to make that real. Currently, we have a little bit of a different system where our regulated materials are governed around a delegated administrative organization, the Recycling Council of Alberta, and the setting of fees and so on. There have been questions around that, and so we have committed to making some changes around the existing fees and how those fees are set for used oil management, paint, tires. However, we have proliferation of e-waste out there that municipalities assure me they are having trouble keeping up with, and other materials, commercial and industrial and so on, that certainly Alberta can do better on, and that's where I think we can have some further conversations around application of EPR throughout the economy.
Yeah, and of course, that would potentially, as we talk about electronics recycling, that actually is a nice segue into my next question, because it is somewhat limited now, I understand, to TVs, computers, printers, copiers, scanners, and whatever fax machines may be left out there. But small appliances, power tools, audiovisual equipment is a real challenge. So do we have an active plan to roll that in and include that in electronics recycling?
Well, that is exactly one of the things that we have to have a few more conversations around with the delegated authority and with municipalities on what the right model is. There is no question, though, that whenever we have lots of smaller household appliances now and lots of smaller electronics than we ever used to have, tablets, all these sorts of things, municipalities rightly point out are increasing their costs to deal with.
Okay. So I guess this gives me the chance to just talk about the amalgamation of the Used Oil Management Authority with Alberta Recycling, and I understand they wrote to the Premier and copied you at the beginning of this year. They aren't too happy with that amalgamation. They feel like there's potentially some negative unintended consequences, and they feel like they were not very well consulted through the process. Have you spoken with them about their concerns on the amalgamation of those two bodies?
Well, I certainly heard those concerns, but you know, the fact of the matter is that we were elected with a mandate to review agencies, boards, and commissions and realize efficiencies where possible, and this was one of those places. I would suggest that one of the larger issues facing the used oil management and the recycling management authorities is the setting of fees and their ability to deal with some of the financial constraints of fees that haven't changed in many years. And so those are the issues that we are going to address. But you know, when you were talking about recyclable materials and ensuring that they are appropriately taken off the landscape, it was a little bit confusing to me as to why we would need two delegated authorities to do that when both concern themselves with recycling of materials.
Mm-hmm. But, you know, from an admin cost perspective, I understand the AUMA was able to share its administrative costs with BC, which now perhaps isn't the case. And so what I'm hearing is that perhaps in an effort to find some of those administrative efficiencies, there's perhaps putting together two organizations that on the surface may appear like they belong together, but at an operational level, at least from the RCA's perspective, the Recycling Council of Alberta's perspective, they don't feel like that in fact does achieve that desired outcome. Is there a risk here where putting things together that may not actually end up, so you know, you talked about setting fees. It doesn't seem to me that that necessarily is something that those two bodies have to be together to achieve. I'm just sort of curious, based on this feedback that I've received from the Recycling Council, that they're not feeling like they're going to achieve what you're suggesting they will.
I think that we wanted to streamline the number of agencies, boards, and commissions out there. There's no need when folks are undertaking similar activities to have two different governing bodies to do so. And I think that any time that you can realize those efficiencies, then you should take a hard look at that. As for some of these other operational details, the department is working through those with the two DAOs, the Recycling Management Authority and the Used Oil Management Authority. We believe that overall, Alberta's approach to recycling does need to change. And having more organizations out there as delegated authorities rather than fewer doesn't really accomplish that goal. And so, you know, we'll work through some of these issues with them, and as they arise. But you know, we made a commitment to Albertans that we were going to minimize the number of appointments and just layers of administration out there, and we've made good on that commitment, and I want to apologize for it.
Thank you, Minister.